Elijah was just a wonderful man, smart, gifted, and I don't think we will see his likeness again soon. He was a close and dear and beloved friend.
Well, heartbreak today after Georgia Congressman John Lewis paying tribute there in that video to a colleague and a friend, Maryland Congressman Elijah Cummings. He was known as a leader in civil rights and government and also a leader of one of the committees that's part of the impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump. But he was also working on recent hot button issues here in Georgia. 11 Alive's Jennifer Bellamy looks at his connection to voting and elections here in our state.
68-year-old Congressman Elijah Cummings died early this morning from complications related to ongoing health issues. The Maryland lawmaker was known for his work in civil rights and had most recently played an important role in the House impeachment inquiry. But he also launched an investigation into Georgia's elections after our fiery race for governor and several lawsuits that followed. A true public servant and leader. That's how many on both sides of the political aisle are remembering Maryland Congressman Elijah Cummings. A statement from Georgia Congressman John Lewis called him an ardent and beloved advocate for the people, with tweets from President Donald Trump and Georgia Republican Representative Doug Collins echoing those feelings. The president saying Cummings would be hard, if not impossible, to replace, and Collins calling him a dedicated public servant and friend. After the 2018 election, the federal government started looking into our state's election systems. In March, Cummings sent letters to Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger asking for a list of files and documents related to complaints of voting problems in recent elections. That includes records of voter poll purges, voter registration issues, voting machine problems in closed or consolidated polling locations. The requests came after other Democratic representatives held a hearing in Atlanta on the topic of voting rights and elections. Cummings also requested documents connected to Kemp's 2018 run for governor while Kemp was serving as Secretary of State. Kemp resigned from the position days after the November election before an official winner was declared. His resignation meant he would not be the one to certify the final vote count. As for right now, it's not clear where the House Oversight Committee is in its investigation of Georgia's elections or how it will proceed following Cummings' death.